All right, what's up, guys? Man, we are beginning a new series tonight titled Where is God? And man, I'm so excited about all the things that we're going to be diving into, but we're going to be in the book of Esther for the next 4 weeks starting tonight. So if you have a Bible, please grab it and go to the book of Esther. We're going to be in Esther 1 and 2, really focusing in on chapter 2 together as we begin this series tonight. And we're looking at, man, such a crucial question, such a massive question, and it's how is God working in our pain and in our suffering? To set up where we're going, this week, my daughter Ivy got her 4-month shots. Okay, and so which is everybody gets their 4-month shots when they're 4 months old, believe it or not, and unless of course you're like an anti-vaxxer, but that's like another conversation for another time, I guess. But she gets her 4-month shots, and man, and Carrie is on one side, and she has to hold down her arms for the nurse that comes in and gives a shot. And then Cassie, my 4-year-old, was holding down the other side of her body as they gave the shot. And so she had to take like this oral medicine, and then she had to get poked 3 times, stab, pop, pop, pop. And immediately after, here's a picture of it, of how she looked. And so she was not a happy little girl, not a happy little girl at all. She is not yawning there. And for the purpose of this message, you can't record in the room, but I'm going to let y'all hear the audio recording of her response to getting the shots. So here it is. Anybody hurt just like hearing it? You're like, oh, my heart. I'm the same way. Now you're like, why are you making me hear your daughter cry out in pain? Well, because you got to think about this moment. So Ivy, obviously, she's at a place where she hasn't quite, she still doesn't quite understand what we're saying when we're communicating to her. So Carrie and her sister, who have always held her, they're like, oh, we love you so much. And all of a sudden, and we're feeding her. And then all of a sudden, she's placed on this bed thing. And then she's being held down. And she sees the nurse come in. And all she sees is my wife's beautiful eyes as she gets stabbed 3 times. And she's looking up, and Carrie's like, she can't explain all the reasons for why she would need to get the shots. All she knows is that she's in pain, and I thought you were supposed to take care of me. What's going on? Now, why is that? How does that connect to us? Well, a lot of times in our life, there's times that we go through things, and there's many times that everyone in this room, unfortunately in some ways, we are going to go through some things where we are crying out, we're looking up to God, and we just feel pain. We feel the stabbing pain of the situation or the circumstance, and we are looking up and we're going, God, I don't understand why this is happening, and I'm looking towards you, and I don't feel like I'm getting any real answers that I understand. Now, this is where Esther, as we go into this, is going to be really good for us tonight as we unpack where is God in all of the pain and suffering that we go through in our lives. Now, we're going to do a flyover of chapter 1. I'm going to give the frat boy spark notes, if you will. And then we're going to go to chapter 2 and really dive in. So here's what happens. King Ahasuerus is how verse 1 starts. It enters with him. And this is King Xerxes from the movie 300, if you've ever seen it. And so this is King Xerxes, and he is not a good guy. And so he decides to celebrate his own glory and splendor. He's going to throw a party. And I mean, it is a crazy party. They're drinking out of golden vessels. They are laying on golden beds, is what chapter 1 says. And they throw a party, and it is a rager. Guess for how long? 180 days. So it is a 180-day just wild party. And at the end of this wild party, at the end of the 180 days, to celebrate that they came to the end of the rager that he threw, he decided, well, it only makes sense that we throw one more 7-day party. And so he actually throws another party for 1 week, okay? And they're all getting trashed. And if you looked at verse 8, it says this in chapter 1. It says, and drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion. For the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. So this is really fascinating. It says there is no compulsion, meaning you can do whatever you want. No holds barred. Whatever you desire, you do that. So here's something that's fascinating. So to be satanic, we might think that that means that we live our life in worship of Satan. But actually, the satanic mantra is this: do as thou wilt. Do as thou wilt. Meaning do whatever you want to do. So to be satanic is to just worship whatever you want and worship yourself. And this is King Xerxes. And this is what's happening, and he does. He gets trashed, and then in verse 10, he sends the Old Testament equivalent of a drunk text, okay? And so he actually sends his boys, because they don't have like technology back then, but he sends his boys, these eunuchs, to go and get his queen. And so he goes to Queen Vashti by sending a messenger, and he wants to show her off to all of these people that are at this party, because it says that his heart was merry with wine, which means that your boy was trashed. And so that's what that means. And so he has her come, and he's trying to get her to come and basically treat her as a stripper. If you look at chapter 1, that's what you're going to see. And she says no. She says, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be treated that way. So what he does is he actually says, that's fine, then I will never see you again, and I will no longer call you my queen. You will have the crown stripped from you, and I will never see you again. And then he decides that he's going to throw a contest to see who his next queen is going to be. Now this is where we get to chapter 2, and we're going to see Esther enter the story. So look at verse 2 of chapter 2. It says, then the king's young men who attended him said, let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa, the citadel. So this would be a place, so a harem is a group of women that would be together just so that way they could have sex with the king. And so he was basically creating his own Playboy mansion. It's under custody of Hegai. It says the king's eunuch who is in charge of the women, let their cosmetics be given, and let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This pleased the king, and he did so. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shammai, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives. So it's a captive people under Persian oppression, because he's the king of Persia. It says, they carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. And then we see Esther enter the story in verse 7. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. And so she was being raised by her cousin because of her parents dying, which we see in the next sentences. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edicts were proclaimed, and when many women were gathered in Susa the citadel in custody of Hegai, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put into custody. This would have been against her will. She would have had no say in it. And so certainly this falls underneath sexual abuse. So she was put in the custody of Hegai, who had charge of the women. And then it talks about how she started to win the favor of everyone around her, and she was given the cosmetics and all this stuff that all these other women in the harem were given. But this is the introduction to the story of Esther. Now the question is okay, why is this in the Bible? Why is this story that we're going to see unfold over the next several weeks, why is it in the Bible, and what are we supposed to learn from it, especially in relation to our suffering and our pain? Well, the first point this evening is this that we see in Esther. God's people are not spared from pain. God's people are not spared from pain. We're going to see some of the cards that she's been dealt in her life. And man, I wish that God's people were spared from pain. I wish that Esther was spared from pain. I wish that you were. I wish that I was, but we're not. And so here's what we're going to see. We're going to see some of the things that she has dealt to her in her life. So in verse 6 that we just read, it says that she comes from this enslaved group of people that's under Persian oppression and captivity. So she's in a place that's not her home. And then to make matters worse, in verse 7, it says that she had neither father or mother. Man, both her parents are dead. And like that's a grief that here in testimonies and as we baptize people, I've had this conversation so often of a student, and I know that you're here in the crowd, but you've lost a parent at some point in your life, and she lost both of her parents. And the grief is unique to have that safety net and that person that raised you and loves you, and they're not there anymore. And Josh, the guy who leads worship here for us, he lost his mom to ALS whenever he was a freshman in college. I was his college pastor, actually. Charlie, who shared on stage her testimony last week, she lost her dad. Reagan, who we just baptized last service, she talked about running from God and feeling so frustrated when she lost her dad. And here she is saying, I've lost the person that raised me. And that's a unique pain and a unique grief. And some of us, we didn't lose our parents physically. They did not die, but we've struggled in other ways from the absence of our parents, them not being there for us. And the abandonment that goes with that and the struggles that go with that. I remember vividly getting ready to go see my dad and having the bags packed. And I'm waiting at the front room, sometimes waiting on the front porch. And then my mom gets the call. And I know as she looks over at me, I know what she's about to say. Hey, son, he's too busy this week. He's not going to be here. I remember empty stands as I played over a decade, 12 years of sports. I remember empty stands whenever it comes to my dad being there. I've experienced that pain and that absence, and so many other people that I've talked to have experienced that, and she has experienced unique amount of loss when it comes to her own lack of parents in her life. And then you see in verse 8 that she was taken and she's put into custody. That she was taken, and this is, like I mentioned, against her will. This is abuse. Taken for the purpose of being brought into the king to have sex. And the stats are 1 in 4 for women and 1 in 6 for men that have been sexually abused. And I've had conversations with people even this semester that someone took something from them that didn't belong to them. And out of our staff, just our college staff, 4 of the 13 people, including all the interns and everybody in the college staff text group, 4 of 13 have been sexually abused or molested, and I'm one of them. And I didn't share that part of my story until I was a grown man, until I was here as a college pastor. Me and Carrie, we had our first daughter, and I just couldn't share it because I thought, man, God, I know that maybe you could use it in someone else's life, but I feel like it makes me less manly. I just can't share that. And there's all kinds of things that we could continue to talk through that we've dealt with in this room, but it goes on for her that she has this unknown future. If you go to verse 11 of chapter 2, it says, every day Mordecai, the guy who took her as her own, her cousin who's raising her, it says every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. They had no idea what was going to happen. And for some of us, man, like we've definitely been in this spot. We just don't know how the future's going to unfold, right? Like who here has ever been in the camp of, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with my life, by raise of hands? Yeah, who's there right now? Hey, look around, guys. Y'all are in good company. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you. But y'all are in good company, so that's good. Figure it out together, right? But we've all been in that place. We're going, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do in my life. And she's going like, I don't know how this future is going to unfold. And he's going and he's checking on her, and she's going, I don't know. And he's checking every day. What is happening? I don't know what's going to happen. And then later on, in chapter 2, verse 21 through 23, what you're going to see if you were to read that is that the king had an assassination attempt on his life. Okay, so there's this political unrest in this society that she's in right now, just as the kind of the cherry on top, unknown future, political unrest. I know when it comes to political unrest, like usually we probably would have a hard time relating to that because people are really agreeable nowadays. And so, no, we know that there's political unrest everywhere, right? Like Trump was indicted this week on different charges. And so that's such a fact that just happened. You're like, wait a second, I thought he wasn't even president anymore. I know. That's how much people just dislike each other right now, man. And so there's all kinds of political unrest in our world today. And this is the society that she's in. This is the society that we are in. Now, there's all kinds of things that I could lay out as far as different things that we go through, but this is just her world. And these are the cards that she's been dealt. Now, the big question that we're asking in Esther is this, is okay, where is God in all of this? Where is God in all of like the pain and the suffering that I see my friends and my family go through? Like, where is God whenever I see somebody that man, they're so sick and they're hurting and I feel like we're crying out and nothing's happening. Where is God? Where is God whenever I'm in this pit of depression and I'm just wanting to get out? I'm trying to claw myself out, but I feel like there's no light in this tunnel right now. Where's God? Where's God in all of this stuff? It's the primary question, actually, that I think Esther is dealing with in a couple of different ways. Where is God? There's a couple ways that people would begin to answer this question. So one would be that Esther, that some people would say, okay, well, here's what God's like. God is like, and I had this conversation with a guy, and whenever we were in the Change My Mind series, this was last semester, but we talked about how, are there any proofs for God? And are there any proofs that Jesus could be that God? And so we spent a couple weeks on that, and we had a conversation, lots of conversations actually, with students based on that series. And so I had this conversation, and he said, when I sat down with him, he goes, man, I agree with you. Like this world and the universe is so intricately put together that I feel like something like the intelligent designer had to be there in some way, form, or fashion. But what he said is, man, here's what I think. I think that God is kind of like a clockmaker. He said, I think like if you know, he said, do you know anything about clocks and how, he's like, it's actually really intricate how they will put, in a watchmaker or a clockmaker, they will put all the pieces in there and then it just goes and it never stops going. And it's very clearly orchestrated and designed by someone. But then that person just says, I'm putting the battery in and now I walk away. And he goes, I think that God's kind of like that. This disconnected view of God. That's not true. I want you to write this down. The first thing that we're going to see is God isn't disconnected from our pain. God isn't disconnected from Esther's life. How do we see this in the book of Esther? Well, it's a really interesting way that we see this in the book of Esther. Did you know, this is really fascinating, that Esther is the only book in the entire Bible that actually does not ever mention the name God. Doesn't mention God, his name, in any form or fashion. In the entire book, not even once. So what is God trying to teach us? Like, why would he take one of the 66 books that is in and comprises the Bible? Why would he take Esther and this story that doesn't even mention God, and why would he include that? What's he trying to tell us? Well, here's one thing. God is working behind the scenes, is what he's trying to tell us. God's not disconnected, but he's actually working behind the scenes. This is so refreshing to me in some weird ways because maybe you're like me and there's a few times in my life that I have just strongly sensed from God that he's speaking something directly to me. There's a few instances that I could share even right now just off the top of my head of God, whenever you just spoke, man, I felt like it was so powerful in the moment. It's like it was directly talking to me. But then there's the rest of my life, right? And how many of y'all are like me that you're like, usually Even whenever God speaks and I'm like, I think that was God, you're like, I think I know. Anybody ever been in that tension? Like, I think I know that God just spoke to me. That's kind of where I've like lived most of my life. And this is Esther. This is Esther trying to teach us, listen, like God is working behind the scenes. And sometimes we don't have the clarity that this is exactly where God said. It doesn't ever say, and the Lord said, and then this person did, like it does in other parts of the Bible. It just unfolds the story. And we get to see that God, in his providential care, in his design of Esther's life, and in his control and sovereignty, he is actually working in the background in all of this. We're going to see that play out over the coming weeks, but God's working in the background. Now, here's why that really matters for us. Because we go through a lot of things in our life. And there's times in my life, man, like even this semester. So I like she even shared here on stage, I've had a battle with mental health. It's been deep bouts a couple of times. And I just have an anxiety kind of, that's kind of stays steady. And I've been much better over the last couple of years, praise God. But this semester even, I had 2 panic attacks. And when I think that some people might mean different things when they say panic attack. But for me, like it feels like I'm going to faint, I'm going to have a heart attack, I'm going to die. I'm talking like my arms, my hands will go numb. I feel like I'm having a stroke or something bad is really, really about to happen, and I'm not sure that I feel like it's impending doom is what it feels like. And then I go to sleep after I have a panic attack, and I'm terrified to get out of bed. And I'm so thankful that now that I've been open with my wife that she'll say, hey, like, don't forget God took you this far. He's not going to leave you now. And don't forget that God's not done working. And I'll get out of bed and I'll just pray. And there's a few things that I do. And I put one foot in front of the other, even when I don't know how this is going to all pan out. Because I believe that God is still working, even sometimes when I can't see how he's working in all of this. And this is true for you. Will you trust that God is working behind the scenes in your life, even whenever you can't see how he's working? Such a key question for us to consider tonight. This message is a simple one, I would say, but it goes to the deep heart struggles that we have. But God, he is not disconnected from our pain. And then here's the second thing. A lot of people, they're like, okay, I don't think that God's the watchmaker and that he just separated himself and he steps away. But there's another view of God. I got this little Pinocchio marionette doll. His nose looks just like mine. You control yourself. It's all right. And so my wife actually has, this is just fun fact for you. My wife has the whole NSYNC. Y'all know who NSYNC is, right? Like bye, bye, bye. I wish she would have said bye, bye, bye to her marionette dolls, but she didn't. She has marionette dolls that of all the NSYNC characters. So pray for her. But for this one, man, like, Carrie, I was like, I need a marionette doll. She was like, the other ones, I don't know where they're at. They're somewhere in the attic. And she was like, so she goes on Facebook Marketplace. And she says, hey, I found a marionette doll. She found this one for $8 on Facebook Marketplace. And so I don't know what thoughts go into your mind when you think of someone who might be selling a marionette doll on Facebook Marketplace. But like none of my thoughts went towards normal. I was like, babe, I'm gonna become a marionette doll when I go to buy this thing. She's gonna do something like they're gonna kill me. I'm gonna die. This is how it ends. But I risked it. And I got away, no strings attached, if you will. There it is. Okay. But some people, here's what they think. They think that God is the puppet master. That God, like with Esther, that God actually, he created and made Xerxes to be this evil king, had him go over, get Esther, take her against her will, and all this stuff, and all the things that happen, that God is actually just the puppet master, and we don't really have much choice at all because God's in ultimate control and he's completely sovereign, right? I would go, no. You misunderstand what it means for God to be sovereign, because in his sovereignty, which means that God is in ultimate control, in his sovereignty, God can choose to give choice. And this is what he did with Adam and Eve. And ever since, the world has been a broken place, not because God broke it, but because we have. But some people, they see God as this puppeteer, this puppet master. And the way that this will play out in conversations is people will say things like, man, I just don't know why God had my parents get divorced. And I'm frustrated and I feel like I just want to run from them. I don't know why like God had my friend get cancer. Why would God do that to them? I don't know why God had my uncle commit suicide. I don't know why that happened. I don't know why this person took their own life. Why did God have that happen? And so on and so forth. And we think, man, like God's just in heaven and he's kind of like, duck, duck, cancer, duck, duck, instead of duck, duck, goose, duck, duck, loneliness, duck, 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 single forever, duck, duck, duck. You know, and we have all these ways that we think, man, I think, and y'all are like, I think that was me. I think he, man, that's not how God works. That's not what it means for God to be sovereign. You can write this down. God is not the director of all of our pain. God is not the director of all of our pain. He is not the puppet master in heaven just making all these things happen that are, man, they're so difficult. The word all here is so key though, because if you're asking the question, so you're telling me God would never bring pain into someone's life? No, that's not what I'm saying. Actually, in the Old Testament, God is a just judge and he will bring pain to somebody in his just judgment. That God will, to get someone's attention, he will bring pain into their life. To bring ultimate good, God will, within the confines of this broken world, that he will bring pain so that way there could be ultimate good from it. Just like Carrie, she brought pain into Ivy's life, but we know that it was because we want her to have a healthy immune system in this broken, fallen world. And that's why that happened. So here's what you can write down in all of this. God's end goal is always good. This is true. God's end goal is always, always good. And here's something that God always does in relation to his people's pain. God always directs his presence to our pain. God doesn't direct all of our pain. He's not the puppeteer, puppet master, but God does direct his presence to all of our pain. This is what God does. And we see this in Esther in a couple of ways. One, God is present through his people. Again, just that chapter 2, verse 11, it says that Mordecai was there and he never left her. And God, man, this is why we just got done doing the church series. See, some of y'all have been hurting and y'all need to lean on the shoulders of the people around you. The people around us can't be our healer, but they can be a shoulder for us to lean on. Jesus is our healer. But God, he is present through his people. And then another way that we see in Esther is simply this. This is that simple truth that I don't think anybody here is going, I've never even heard this if you've been in church or been at the way a while, but this is so true. God is present when you can't see. Not only God is orchestrating things and working things, but God is actually present with you when you can't see. See, here's where the illustration with Carrie and Ivy falls apart, because Ivy at least could look at Carrie. And maybe you're in the room, and I think probably all of us have had this in some way where we were crying out to God. We're going, God, like, I can't see you. I can't feel you. I feel like maybe I'm just talking to a ceiling right now. Where are you at? And that's where we're at in our life. And that's where we have to realize that God is present when we can't see. You know, the name Esther is really, really another cool, fascinating study point for the book of Esther. In the Persian name for Esther, which remember, she's in Persian Empire, it actually means star, that you would be shining. Very clearly seen, right? But the Hebrew name for Esther actually means hidden. This is fascinating. So how can it be both shining but hidden? Here's how. I was speaking with a student, and she was struggling with, and has been struggling with, deep depression, and she even had to step away from her job because of it. And she actually said that I'm not going to take my life because I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. But at the same time, you know one of the hardest things for me to do is? She said it's to open the Bible. Because I open the Bible and I just get so sad because when I opened the Bible, I used to feel God speak in such clear ways, and now I just feel nothing. And what I said to her was this simple illustration that I think is so true, and it's true for all of us, and we're gonna have to hold on to this truth. And it's this, I said, simply put, she was saying, I just can't see God anywhere. I said, well, it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because right now, if storm clouds rolled through and it blocked the sun that rises every single day of our life, it blocked the sun, you and I are not gonna sit down and go, I don't think it's here anymore. I think it's gone. We're gonna go, no, the sun's still there, it's just blocked by the clouds. And right now you are in a season, and guys, I'm not downplaying depression. I know that storm cloud stays sometimes for a season. But but God is still shining. And God is still present, though you can't see him. He is still there. Just like the sun is there when the storm clouds cover it, God is there. So this hidden God is still shining even in the pain that you're suffering right now. Does that make sense? This is what Esther is trying to teach us. And God is working. And whenever you can't feel God, you know what God feels about you? When you go, man, I can't feel God's presence. Here's what God feels about you. He hurts. He hurts because he loves you. John, in the book of John, verse 11:35, the shortest verse in the Bible, is Jesus wept. And he was about to go and raise Lazarus from the grave. He knew he was about to turn a funeral into a celebration service. Why was he crying then? He cries because he sees the pain of the people that he loves. God hurts when he sees his people hurting. And some of y'all, maybe there's someone in here that you just need to hear that tonight. God's hurting with you, and God is there even though you might not feel him right now. And God is going to work all the things they're going through. Like somehow he orchestrates something in the background. He's working and he's present and he's orchestrating something out of the brokenness. Whenever my wife and I, we got married and we went on our honeymoon, we went to Oahu in Hawaii. And there's this like strip of places where like people would be like they're outdoor performers and all this cool stuff. It's really fun. And one of the ladies that I walked by, I'm really not an art guy. Like for instance, like the only thing I appreciated about art appreciation when I took it was getting out of it. And so maybe that's your thing. And I mean, hey, different strokes for different folks, right? But I was like walking up and I was like, Carrie, like do you see that? That's amazing. And it was like drawing me in. It looked like, and there was these turtles that she had painted. And in the backs of these turtles were actually, it looked like jewels that had been placed on the canvas. And as I got closer, I realized, man, and I was so drawn in. And so much so that I walked up and I realized the back, it wasn't jewels. It was like broken shards and pieces of glass and stuff that she had beautifully placed together to be on this turtle's back. And I was like, man, that's so cool. And I asked her, I was like, man, I had struck up a conversation. I was like, hey, how much is that? And she told me the price, and I was like, oh, never mind. It's way too much for me. But I was like, so tell me how you put this together. How'd you start this? And she said, well, every single morning I go on a walk, and I see these broken pieces on the beach, and I pick them up, and I start to place them in what other people would see as a throwaway. I see as something to bring in to make something beautiful of it. And this is what God does with the pieces of our lives, right? That he brings in the broken pieces and he starts to make something beautiful of it. Now, maybe you're going, okay, well, I don't understand how God can use this thing though, Travis. I don't know how God's going to use this thing that I'm dealing with. And I've had questions where people are going, how is God going to work in this? And they'll list something, man, just tough. And the answer is, I don't know. Why did this happen? Whenever I was 19, 20 years old, there was a teenage mom who her baby died. And I held her in my arms as she was crying. She said, "Why did this happen?" And I'm never going to pretend that I can know why that happened. But if you're going to ask the question, okay, where's God? If you're going to say, okay, where is God in all of this then? Not why did it happen? Not what is God doing? I don't know. But where is God in this? What Esther is going to tell us is the unseen God is right here. That's the message of Esther. That he's working, and God, he always directs his presence to his people. God is working right here, right now. And so if you are at a place where you go, man, I feel like if you're talking about God orchestrates something out of the brokenness and all these things, these cards that I've been dealt in my life, maybe you're still at the place where you feel like it's just stuff that's just flung onto the beach of your life. And you don't see how the art maker is going to make something beautiful of this. You don't see how God's going to bring ultimate good to this. You don't see any of that. This is where we're at in Esther 1 and 2. She doesn't see how this is all going to come together. You know, Esther chapter 1, verse 3, it says that it starts and it's the third year of his reign, is what it says. The third year of his reign. So Esther's taken, and then if you go to Esther chapter 2, verse 16, it says, "And when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, it's in the 7th year of his reign." 4 years. She had no idea how any of this was going to play out. 4 years. And maybe that's where you're at. I just want to tell you, what do you do when you're in that waiting place, when you're in that waiting, holding tank? What does she do, and what should we do? Here's what we do. We play the cards that we've been dealt in our life. What do I mean by you play so we all have been given cards just like her, but she didn't just hold those and stay frustrated and just get bitter. No, actually, in chapter 2, verse 9, it actually says that she starts to win favor. And over and over and over again, and we're going to talk about this more next week, but she wins favor. And it says that she has favor and she has favor. How in the world does that happen? It's because she didn't stay bitter. Instead of staying bitter, she said, I'm not going to get bitter. Instead, I'm going to see how God is going to work in this. And I'm going to take the cards that I've been dealt in my life. All of us have been dealt cards in our life. And God's going, listen, would you lay it down to me? When I say play the card, I'm saying, God, I don't know how in the world you're going to use this, but I'm laying it down to you, and I'm trusting that you are present and that you are working behind the scenes. So with your unknown future, maybe the last 4 years, would you say, or maybe you're in that tough situation, you would say, okay, God, I don't know how you're going to work, but I'm laying it down and surrender to you. I'm going to trust you. Maybe you have dealt with loss. And maybe there's a lot of pain that you have in your life, and you go, man, I've had so much loss in my life. Just like her. Would you not hold it to the chest and refuse to give it to God, but instead say, God, even this, I believe that you can use it. Not that you just caused all of it, not that you're the puppet master, but that you can use this. Maybe you're the one in here that has struggled with abandonment from other people that should have been there in your life, and God's going, would you lay that card down? Would you trust me? I've laid that card down. I've said, God, I want to see how you use it. For some of us, I have no idea. It doesn't tell us what her mental health was, but I believe that she had several dark nights of the soul in her life. In these 4 years, that she had no idea how this was going to pan out. And maybe you are the person dealing with deep wrestling with depression or anxiety or a mixture of the two. And would you just say, God, I have no idea how this is all going to play out. I just want to tell you a couple things. One, I want you to know that you're not alone. That God is present. We're here too. And that this is not forever. And that God is going to work in this, but you've got to lay it down. Would you say, God, I surrender that card to you. I'm laying it down. I'm playing the card, God. And then with our abuse that some of us went through in this room, we'd say, God, okay, this is so difficult. Had a hold on me for a long time. We'd say, God, I'm going to lay it down to you and see how you might want to use that. And I'm going to trust that you are. And you know what happens when you play the card? When you play the cards that you've been dealt, what happens? You say, God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to see how you're going to work in this. I'm going to believe that you're working. I'm going to believe that you're present. What happens is you realize that the cards that you've been dealt don't define you. The cards that you have been dealt in life do not define you. God does. God gets the final word, guys. And God is saying, let me have the final word in your life. And God's going to use all the pain and all the suffering and all the stuff. He's doing something. And it's really crazy, man, how God uniquely uses pain to reach this suffering world. Here's what A.W. Tozer says in relation to how God uses our pain. He says, only people with scars can preach a Savior with scars to sinners with scars. And I believe that's true. And as you lay down your life to God, as you lay down the card that you've been struggling to play, know that you're laying down your life to the one who laid down his life for you because he loves you, because he is there. And one of the things that placing yourself in God's presence, just playing the cards you've been dealt, often is simply that. Just placing myself in the presence of God. And so tonight as we go into worship, would you do that? And don't run from the God who never left you. Right after and immediately after she was given the shots, what does Carrie do? She picks her up and she holds her close. And this is what God wants to do with you tonight. He wants to hold you. Spiritually, don't keep him at arm's distance, but say, okay, God, I'm gonna let your embrace come around. Would you feel his heavenly arms come around you tonight, even as we're about to go into this final song? Don't push God away. Let him love you. Let's pray. Would you take this moment and would you just pray to God? God, is there a card that I've been unwilling to lay down, that you're calling me to lay down? Maybe God's just calling you right now to surrender your life to you. Maybe the card is your life. You've never surrendered your life to Jesus. And if you've never given your life to Jesus, God, he endured the pain of the cross so that way you could have just eternity and experience his presence forever. He endured that pain so you could have his presence forever, and he offers to save your life, and he loves you. Would all of us just stay in the presence of God as we sing this song? Let's worship.
If you need to